Hey there, welcome Facebook friends. Thank you for joining us today. We are happy to be here with Dr. Russell Jaffe, owner, founder, and creator of Perk Integrative Health. As you come in, please like the show and share the show so that we can get this message out to as many folks as possible. Today we're talking about D3 and K2 and putting it together in the same bottle for you. And Dr. Jaffe is going to be explaining to us why that's beneficial and what that can do for your system. We're going to be talking about everything from sitting in the sun to how to take these supplements and what it's actually going to do for you. So thank you, Dr. Jaffe, for being here with us. We love having you here.
A pleasure.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's start at the beginning. How do we even know if we need D3, Dr. Jaffe?
Well, with regard to vitamin D, we at the Health Studies Collegium looked all over the world for the healthiest levels of vitamin D, that is 50 to 80 nanograms per ml. You should have a 25-hydroxy-D, that's the correct analyte. You don't have to measure all three forms of vitamin D, that's cumbersome and expensive. You want a 25-hydroxy-D in the 50 to 80 range, and that compares to a typical American who's below 15, and most laboratory ranges kind of top out at about 30, because unless you supplement intensively, your vitamin D level will be deficient, and your cardiovascular risk, your risk of cancer, your risk of chronic degenerative, inflammatory, and autoimmune self-attacking illness goes up dramatically as your vitamin D level goes down. And as my grandmother used to say, the rents are going up and the ceilings are coming down. So there's less availability of these nutrients, like the active cholecalciferol form of vitamin D. That's what we call D3. I don't recommend D2. The ergosterol, which is a synthetic equivalent, a bioequivalent, that I don't think is equivalent. And I know that it's a different form. I know that it has activity at some receptors, but it's not the same as nature's D3. And since I want to improve your cardiovascular health vitality, I want to reduce your risk of everything from your heart attacking you to cancer, I therefore want everyone to have a healthy vitamin D level. And we do know the answer, 50 to 80 nanograms per ml. Now, the Vitamin D Society has a slightly different range. There are other advocacy groups that have slightly different ranges. As you know, we not only look for the healthy people's values, but we look for a margin of safety. So if you're a little above 80, I'm okay. If you're a little below 50, that's okay, but increase your vitamin D, and then in a few months come back and you'll see how promptly you can correct this major public health and personal risk.
And that 50 to 80 range is the difference between a traditional lab range and a functional value, something we can actually do something with.
No, that's right. As you know, Melissa, we pioneered the concept of best outcome values or ranges. That is, what are the values of the people who are at the least risk of cardiovascular, of cancer, of autoimmune, of inflammatory chronic illness? And it turns out that range is 50 to 80. And you get there easier, more efficiently, and more safely by taking drops under the tongue, because they are taken up easily before swallowing. They go to the brain before the body. That's an advantage. And so since Michael Hollick, a Dr. Sunshine expert in vitamin D and has written many books and research papers, he points out that maybe up to 40 million Americans do not absorb vitamin D from their intestinal tract. They have enough maldigestion, dysbiosis, atrophy, enteropathy, and lack of repair that they don't absorb vitamin D from their gut. So I have colleagues who call me up and say, I gave X amount of vitamin D and the vitamin D level didn't budge. And I say, well, did you give it as a drop under the tongue before swallowing, or did you give it orally? And they say, what's the difference? Well, the difference is easy uptake for the drop and maybe little or no uptake from the pill. So vitamin D is too often given as a tablet when it should be given as a drop that you just drop under the tongue. And how much do you take? How many drops? You take as many drops as you need to get into the 50 to 80 range. There is no magic dose. People are unique. We are different. And therefore, we need different amounts of vitamin D. And at different phases of our life, we need different amounts of vitamin D. I'm old enough to actually cherish the fact that my most recent vitamin D level was in the high 70s. And by many other markers, my risk for cardiovascular disease, for cancer, for autoimmunity, for chronic degenerative disease is vanishingly low, I'm glad to tell you, because of choices, habit choices, lifestyle choices that have included a makeover in our kitchen, in our bedroom, and in our bath, so that we reduce the toxin exposures and we optimize the intake to reach the goal values. In the case of vitamin D, 50 to 80. So some people need a few drops, some people need 10 to 20 drops. You need as much as you need to reach your goal value based on your oxidative stress and a whole lot of factors. But the good news is you can measure the 25-hydroxy-D and it should be in the 50 to 80 range. And you take as many drops as you need to get you up into that range, knowing that it is safe and effective and proven in a very important research study published just last year in the International Journal of Endocrinology on the synergy between vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. So we have combined the two, knowing that each one is beneficial and that there is a synergy of benefits when you put them together.
So, Dr. Jaffe, let's back up just a little bit. There's an article floating around that's saying that both Coumadin and cholecalciferol, when dosed high enough, can be used as rodenticides. And for those of you that are out there that are just joining us, a rodenticide is, a pesticide, but it's designed to kill small rodents. So can you speak to that and assure our customers that we're not dosing anywhere near that? So when we say take enough to get to 50 to 80, we're not suggesting that you do something harmful.
Well, first of all, Coumadin, known as warfarin for the Wisconsin Area Research Foundation, that's where the name comes from, is rat poison. It is how you kill rats. However, it's because rodents are not people. However people behave like rodents, they're not metabolically rodents. So if you were a rat, you should not, well, you should be very careful of eating warfarin. However, that has nothing to do with the anticoagulant effect that Coumadin, warfarin has on the blood clotting system, having to do with reducing thrombin production in people who are hypercoagulable. Hypercoagulable is a fancy word for your blood clots too much, too fast, and that can lead to heart attacks and stroke. That can lead to peripheral and central vascular problems, and we don't want you to have that. Now, I was a coagulationist before I became an immunologist and a functional physician. So we worked out how collagen activates platelets, how platelets are essential to repair your blood vessels, but if there's too many of them in clumps floating around, that is a problem. So if you've had certain kinds of valve replacements, if you've had certain kinds of coagulopathy risk, deep vein thrombosis, the doctor may put you on an anticoagulant. Now, you would measure that if you take Coumadin with a test called an INR. And I'll tell you a quick story about my mom. My mom was famous for doing what she thought was right rather than what the doctor recommended. So I got a panicked call because my mother had had a heart valve replaced and she was on Coumadin. And they called me up saying her value for her INR is off the chart. We're afraid your mother's liver is failing. I said, please ask my mother if she failed to take the Coumadin for 4 or 5 days and then remembered yesterday that she didn't take it and then took 5 doses yesterday. Went over to my mom and my mom said, did my son ask you to ask me that? You have to talk to the patient. You have to listen to them and evoke enough trust that they will tell you the truth and not what they think you want to hear. Very often when doctors ask people questions, the patient wants to be polite and compliant. They're not sure the doctor is really all that interested. What I try to do, as you know, is to make myself a bit more human and a little bit vulnerable by often telling an anecdote that I think they will be interested in, amused by, and can identify with. And in turn, I say, you know, if you're completely honest with me, I can be a better doctor. And if you withhold anything from me, I'm not going to be able to help you as much. So I try to make it safe for people to say things to me that maybe they haven't said to other physicians, or if they started on the conversation, they got shut down. So I do believe that evoking healing responses has to do with evoking healing responses, which means having the confidence that the professional knows the guidance for me as an individual, not just for the population or not just for the cohort.
So now let's move on to our new announcement that we're going to be making pretty shortly. But we're talking about K2 and D3. What is K2's role in this new product?
Right. See, there are different forms of vitamin K, K1, K2, K7, K3, this, that, and the other. And there are different forms of vitamin D. What we use is nature's most active and bioavailable form. Very often we enhance the uptake and chaperone the delivery so that we get results that others aspire to, that others would wish for, but they don't have the evidence. We do, and we have the evidence that the synergy of benefits, in this case between D3 and K2, is very strong. Very strong in terms of cardiovascular health, very strong in terms of cancer risk reduction. And may I say that if I was at risk or had and was managing cancer, I would make sure that my biochemistry and nutrition was in the optimum or best possible functional state based on these 8 biomarker tests, based on the self-assessments that we talk about often, and following through on the ways in which we can become healthier, reduce our risk, know that we're making the right choices, healthier choices, by reducing the exposure to the bad stuff, increasing the intake of the good stuff, and encouraging others to be joyful with us. I recommend walking 45 minutes a day because sitting is the new smoking. I recommend dancing if you want to improve your coordination. I learned that from Ashley Montague many years ago. There was a man vigorous in his 90s, took many supplements like we're talking about, and danced for about half an hour a day. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes alone, but he danced. So we can choose to be healthier. We can make the choices that give us the benefit of D3 and K2, give us the benefit of these natural and safer forms of nutrients in the way nature designed them and kept safe in the way PERC Integrative Health applies them.
How do we know which product do we need? Do we go with the D3 Cell Guard, or are we going to go with the D3K2? How do we know?
Well, see, what I'm pretty clear about is that people want a certain amount of vitamin K. And then they need a variable amount of vitamin D. So let's say everyone starts on the D3K2 combo, and now you check and your vitamin D is a little higher, but it's not yet in the 50 to 80 range. You add enough drops to bring yourself up into the 50 to 80 range while continuing the D3K2.
Okay.
So you don't want to take pharmacologic amounts of anything, from my point of view. You want physiology to be applied and to work for you. And so that means starting with the D3K2 and adding the drops of the D3 Cell Guard to bring yourself into the 50 to 80 range.
And what is the big difference between this K2D3 new product that's coming out and the other ones that are available? What's the big difference?
Well, the big difference is that all of the other products that I know of try to fool Mother Nature in one way or another. And we work with Mother Nature and find her to be very strict, but very compassionate, empathetic. And so we look upstream at the physiology and biochemistry. We look downstream at the cellular metabolism and how this all interacts. And we have found the synergy, we and others, the literature is very strong, that the synergy is profound when you start with D3K2 and then add the drops of vitamin D needed to bring yourself into the 50 to 80 range without getting your K2 too high.
Excellent. So even sun worshipers like me that still need a little bit of help with D3, this is the product of choice here.
Well, when you say sun worshiping, I hope that means being naked in the sun, because when you walk outside today and your face and hands are available, but you've got clothes on, only about 8% of your body area is exposed to the sun. And so unless you're a lifeguard in Tel Aviv Beach, you probably need supplements. And you need supplements to bring you into the healthier range as we're talking about it. And now, fortunately, we're no longer just giving everyone a fixed dose, which is what happened decades ago. Right. We now can personalize because we know what the goal is, and we know how to get you there with safer forms that are easily taken up, that often go to brain before body, and that work synergistically with each other, because there's nothing to interfere with their uptake, there's nothing to interfere with their transport and utilization, and that's what, as you know, we have pioneered over the last decades.
And we make it super convenient because people can run their 25 OHD test in conjunction with their LRA by ELISA Act test, and we have even more results to come up with a specific game plan.
Exactly right. And our recommendation is to start with the personal self-assessments, all 4 of them, and then move on to the 8 predictive biomarkers at their goal value or best outcome value, and see in a few months if you can add life to years and years to life. In fact, on a relative risk basis, we can often add decades of quality life within a few months by following this comprehensive, this functional, this very personalized, but proactive approach.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffe, for being here with us today. Dr. Jaffe, any parting words before we sign off?
Be well. Enjoy the spring. It brings hope and blooms.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Everyone, we'll see you next Tuesday at 2:30. Take care. Bye-bye.